In this video, I'll give you the worst value at each position in 2024 fantasy redraft leagues. I'm Jim Coventry of Rotowire. Look, sometimes superstar players aren't always superstar fantasy performers. So that's why CJ Stroud is not a great value in fantasy drafts, usually going off the board around quarterback 6. Now, look, we don't question Stroud's a superstar, already going to be a superstar. Here's a couple things. First of all, the entire offensive philosophy of the Texans would have to be changed if they went to 3 receiver sets, because they used what we call 21 personnel. Andrew Beck's a fullback. He uses a lot of blocking schemes to get set up to help draw an extra defender into the box, which allows the Texans and teams like them with the same offensive systems to have easier time throwing the ball downfield, again, with a lighter secondary. And so, yes, there's Nico Collins, there's Stephon Diggs, there's Tanked Out, and there are many times when all 3 will be on the field. But realistically, if this offense is doing what it's supposed to do, they bring in Joe Mixon, they're going to run a lot. They ran a lot last year, even though they didn't have a good running game. And they're going to probably use these heavy personnel sets. The other thing is, CJ Stroud was not much of a runner. And running is massive in fantasy football. Look, we have great pocket passers that fall in drafts every year. Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott runs a little bit, but we see the pocket passers almost always fall. Mahomes is usually the exception to that rule. And this is a Texans team. The defense could get better in year 2 under DeMeco Ryans. They may not be playing shootout after shootout every week. All these things put together, even when we look at CJ Stroud last year, he only had 1 game with more than 2 touchdowns. It was a 5-touchdown game against Tampa, who couldn't cover anybody. That's no fault of Stroud's. And Stroud actually, he was having his best work in weeks 9 through 12. 4 of his 6 big 300-yard games, they came against defenses that were number 22 to 29 against quarterbacks. Again, not his fault. He's a great quarterback. But when there were 5 games, including the playoffs, when Stroud faced a top 10 defense against quarterbacks, in 4 of those 5 games, Stroud had 0 touchdowns. Now, the Cleveland playoff game was the exception. They went wild. It was a perfect scheme against scheme matchup. Browns had no answers for what the Texans did. Not Stroud's fault again. So all that said, Stroud had 4 games with 25 fantasy points. If you're a top-tier quarterback, you probably need to exceed that number. That's a quarter of your games. So that said, great quarterback for fantasy, put up good passing numbers, not probably much as a runner, and ultimately not the level of passing production that we need to spend that kind of a pick. Kyren Williams is next. Kyren Williams, again, he is a player that is going top 7, top 8 at running back. He missed 7 games as a rookie. He missed 5 games last year. In addition, he broke his hand in the NFC playoff game. Now, fortunately, it was the last game of the season, so he didn't miss time because there was no time to miss. Injuries are real with him. Also, 2 years ago, as a rookie, Kyren Williams was expected to have a bigger role. He didn't do very well, and therefore he didn't see the field that much in the second half of that season when he was healthy. Well, last year, Cam Akers was not playing well. Kyren Williams got in right away. The Rams caught the league off guard. Sean McVay always does this by running the duo scheme downhill. The league got very good defending outside zone runs with light boxes. So the Rams were ahead of the curve. Their 3 interior linemen weighed 1,000 pounds. They were perfect for duo. Well, Kyren Williams, right space, right time. Puts up almost 100 scrimmage yards per game. Beautiful. And you don't take that away from Kyren Williams. He did great. But here's the thing. They draft Blake Corum. Blake Corum, higher draft capital. Very, very possible that Kyren Williams is not as good of a running back as Blake Corum is. And with the injury history of Kyren Williams, how much does Sean McVay really want to use him? So Corum should have an immediate role in the backfield. But if Corum's a better player, Kyren Williams may be deployed a lot differently than he was last year. So look, you need a perfect world for Kyren Williams to be back to being that workhorse back, but the injuries are still there. And if you're drafting him that high in draft, red flags are a problem. Too many for my liking. If you like videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the Rotowire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings by getting a free 2-day trial. No credit card needed. You just head on over to rotowire.com/Jim. You can check out all of our content. All right. Again, another player. These are good players. Malik Nabers is going to be a superstar. But here's the deal. He's going as high as wide receiver 15 in some drafts. Depending on home leagues, he might go a little later. But that's a high draft cost. You're pairing him with Daniel Jones. Not excited about that. We saw now Look, Daniel Jones isn't Zach Wilson, but we saw last year Garrett Wilson get a ton of targets and not a really great season. Well, Daniel Jones, again, maybe a little better, but Malik Nabers just see a ton of attention. The offensive line is terrible, and therefore there may not be time for downfield developing plays. I'm worried about the quality of targets for Malik Nabers. Yes, Brian Dable's going to try to scheme him up and get him the ball a lot, but you need a situation around you. And the Giants may be just good enough on defense where they're not in chase mode every single week. There'll be plenty of weeks they are. Put that all together. Ultimately talented player in Malik Nabers. Don't trust the quarterback. Realistically, Wan'Dale Robinson will be open quickly and may offer easier sight lines for Daniel Jones. I just think it's going to be really difficult for Malik Nabers to reach the wide receiver 15. If his draft stock went down a little bit, much more interested, not where it's at. The last one, Sam LaPorta. I know you're going to hate me. You're going to hate me for saying this. Sam LaPorta was great last year. Great player. In terms of yardage, yeah, he was a tight end 1 overall, but the yardage wasn't. Yardage is okay, but it was 882 yards. And usually our top tight end is over 1,000 yards, but 10 touchdowns. And touchdowns are really, really tough to sustain. We don't see many 10 touchdown tight end seasons. I looked over the last 5 years. It's a handful, 5, 6, not many. So the odds of LaPorta repeating it are small. It's possible. And the other thing is yards after the catch, 28th percentile. So he's not like a super athlete after the catch. So you are counting on him repeating that 120 targets, repeating those touchdowns. But remember, all that said, he had 234 PPR points. There's about a 30-point difference between LaPorta and tight end 6. It wasn't very much. LaPorta's a great player. But if you're going to talk 30 points and LaPorta's going in the 3rd round, Mark Andrews late 4th, early 5th, you're going to get similar production a round and a half, 2 rounds later. So that said, I don't think LaPorta is a good value because we're drafting him as if he's going to separate from some of those other tight ends. And in the best case scenario, I think he kind of just meets them, and that's about as far as it goes. Great player, but out at ADP.